Hey guys, my name is Theresa LaFeve, and I have been in recovery for a little over 4 years. Thank you. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my childhood, how I got here, and what it's been like since I've, found God, but found recovery also. Growing up, my childhood, I would say, was everything but normal. My mom struggled with alcoholism, she struggled with depression, and she was in a lot of abusive relationships. My dad had walked out on us when I was just a baby. I really don't remember him at all. I met him one time in my life, and it was just complete regret. We never should have went there. It was just disappointment, you know. At the age of 9, my mom remarried to a person who also liked to drink, so you can imagine how that went. We moved out of my grandparents' house, in with my mom, in with her husband, in with my uncle. He lived with us. It was not a good life. It was not a good situation. That marriage shortly ended for my mom. But in the midst of all of that, just chaos and dysfunction in our household, I was abused by my uncle, someone who was supposed to love me and care for me, and that's not what I got from him. It's heartbreaking. And looking back now, I can see that for years of my early childhood, I was being groomed by my uncle. I can see that now through therapy, through all of that. I learned that was what was happening, that led up to that abuse that went on and is the reason that it went on for several years. You can imagine what that does to a young child. So just everything in my life just plummeted, you guys. My grades, I went from being an A/B student to failing every single class in school. Social anxiety was through the roof. I had trust issues out the yin-yang. I mean, just so many negative consequences for someone else's actions. I started self-harming when I was 14. I dropped out of high school when I was 16. Thank God I went back and got my GED later in my life. But I just let go of everything. I didn't care. I didn't care about making a future for myself. I didn't care. I just stopped doing life. Soon after that, I started experimenting with drugs. I have a really bad back. Got back issues. You guys pray for me. I was introduced to pain pills at 15. They help the back pain. They help any pain, emotional pain, everything. At the age of 16, I had landed myself in a mental health and substance abuse treatment center in Lexington, Kentucky, and I stayed there for a few weeks. I said all of the right things. I went to all of the groups, and they let me out. When I went home, I didn't go home. I was 16. I didn't go back to my mom's. I was bouncing around from friends' houses, from boyfriends' houses. I wasn't in school. I wasn't doing anything. But I thought my life, I had everything under control. You know, I didn't. I had my first daughter when I was 20. I was able to stop using to have a healthy baby. That had to be God. I didn't even know him then, but it was not a struggle for me to stop using for those 9 months to have a healthy baby. It had to be God. At 21, the following year, I had my second daughter. I got married. Terrible marriage, volatile, just abuse and drinking and drug use, and my kids witnessed every bit of it, and it's just, it didn't last long, thank God. After 1 year, we divorced, and I found a new drug. I started using methamphetamines, and that grabbed a hold of me harder than anything ever did. My kids experienced even more abuse. They were drugged to every trap house. They lived in my car with me for a short period of time because CPS took them from me because I was unfit. I stopped going to court. I didn't go to my CPS trials. The judge closed the case and gave my ex-husband my kids. I ended up, I didn't have visits, I didn't see my kids. I was just running rampage through my town. It wasn't long until that caught up with me because I landed myself in jail with 14 felony firearm charges, and that does not look good on anything for anybody. It was real bad. But my life, that was a cycle of guilt, shame, remorse, using to try and cope, wishing that I could stop using, not being able to, feeling guilt, shame, and remorse, using to cope, not being able to stop. That was my life. Thank God that someone threw me in jail because I was going to kill myself. I had a little time in jail to dry out. I didn't have anything to use to try and cope with the pain that I was feeling inside, the unrecognized trauma, undealt with traumas. I had to sit there and dry out, and all of those thoughts and feelings of I've abandoned my children, I've hurt them in so many different ways. All of those feelings come back. And I did what any little girl does. I called my mom, who at this time, thank God, had quit drinking, was remarried. She's still married to the same guy today. He's my stepdad. He's great with her. And I said, when they let me out of jail, will you please come pick me up and take me home with you? Like, just don't let me have any control over my life because I am messing it up. So she did. She picked me up from jail. She took me to Letcher County. I was born and raised in Lexington, by the way. I entered into a program there called the Solutions Program, which is an outpatient drug treatment center. I did really well for 6 months, but it's the same song and dance, you guys. I was saying the right things. I was going to the classes. I was doing what I had to do to get them to sign my papers. I was working 2 jobs, so I was keeping myself busy. I hired a lawyer. I wanted to fight for my kids. I wasn't getting results in the courtroom. This judge was not impressed. It took a really long time for him to kind of come around to me. He was not going to make it easy on me. But thank God he didn't, because it means so much more now. While I was in that outpatient treatment center, I met the man that I would later marry. Yeah. But you know, it was great at first, and he knows this too. I mean, he's sitting right there, but it was great at first. But I was working at a gas station. We were living at my mother's house. We were going nowhere. I was trying to pay for this lawyer to try and get my kids back, and it was going nowhere. My results in the courtroom were not good. It was not easy. So he's in recovery also, but we did what a lot of addicts do when we're just empty, and we're tired, and we weren't working our recovery. I mean, we were going to the bars on the weekend. We were drinking. We weren't using drugs, but we were drinking every weekend. We weren't working an honest program, and we sure as heck didn't know God then. Luckily for me, he'd been through an ARC program before, so he knew all about this. I had no idea. We relapsed together. And then I was very quickly met with an ultimatum. And he told me, he said, we can go to treatment and we can try and do this internship thing and maybe our lives can turn around, and I hope that you come with me, but if you don't want to go, I'm still going. That was what he said to me. I didn't have anything else going for me. So of course, let's go. I was sick. I didn't feel good. It was longest car ride of my life. But 3 days later, after that ultimatum was given to me, he called his friend. I believe it was Lee Dixon, wasn't it? Lee Dixon, yeah. And he helped get us into treatment 3 days later. I went to Karen's place. This was January 2nd of 2018. I went to Karen's place. He went to Sanibel. I was terrified, absolutely terrified. But it's the crazy thing. It's that mysterious love you were talking about. When I walked into Karen's place, I was not friendly. I was sick. Oh my gosh. But I was met by some of the most compassionate and loving people who were so excited that I was there. And they didn't know me, but they were so happy. And I'm so happy you're here, Theresa. Thank God you made it here. We've been praying for you. They didn't even know my name yet, But that's the kind of people that you guys are with every single day. People that love you even though they don't know your name, love you even though they haven't met you yet, are praying for you way before you ever get there. So the first 60 days of my treatment, I worked on traumas. I had my first real encounter with God, and that was not easy. I didn't grow up in church. I didn't know how to even read a Bible. I was so embarrassed when I asked my PSS to show me how to read scriptures because I had no idea. And I'm still such a baby in Christ. I have not even hardly scratched the surface. But I know that there's so much more. Treatment's not easy, and I recognize that too. When I was in phase 1, I lost my uncle, and I chose not to go to his funeral because it was too dangerous for me, and I know that, to be around old family, to risk giving myself a chance on making a bad decision. So I chose not to go. When I was in phase 2, I learned that my children were being abused by their dad and had been taken out of his care. And I wanted to run. I wanted to leave. I wanted to go rescue my kids. I wanted to save them. But I hadn't even been granted visits yet. So what was I going to do? I had to realize really fast that I really didn't have much to offer the situation, and I had to trust my children to the care of God. I had to trust Him to care for them and keep them protected until I could. And so that's what I did. I stayed put, which is what all of my staff members were telling me. It's what Kyle was telling me on the phone call when I told him I wanted to leave. I stayed put. I listened. We were both accepted into the internship program, I believe about 7 days apart, but we both got accepted. And for the rest of that first year of our recovery, I'm not going to say that it was easy. It was not easy, but we were committed, and we continued to work on our recovery apart. When we were interns, we decided to do bi-weekly visits together because I was finally granted visits with my kids. I saw my kids every 2 weeks, and I spent 1 day with Kyle that same weekend. The other weekend that we were allowed to pass, we didn't take one. We chose to stay in treatment. And that was a really grown-up decision for us to make. In January of 2019, we were both hired as staff. Thank God that We were allowed to stay in intern housing until we had a house because we didn't have a house. I didn't even have a car at this point. Like, we had nothing. We saved our first paycheck. We rented our first little house. We had nothing. I think Christ Temple donated the bed and the couch that we had when we moved in, and that was it. We didn't have a refrigerator or a stove. We had a little styrofoam cooler with some lunch meat and peanut butter and stuff. He's laughing because he knows it's true. That was it. But we worked and we got those things. Starting over is never easy, and if you're an addict, you know that. You've probably tried starting over at least a dozen times. I did, with nothing. It's not easy, but it's so rewarding when you do things the right way and you see God's blessings just pouring in your life. I was so stressed out, you guys. I had no idea how to manage money. I had no idea what I was doing, you know. And all of the things that I was stressed about. How are we going to afford a fridge? How are we going to buy a stove? That stuff is expensive. I can't afford that. I'm still like paying for this lawyer, you know. But God made sure that we got everything that we needed. Like, people didn't even know that we needed those things, and they were being offered to us. It was the craziest experience, mysterious love. God answered prayers that I didn't even know I needed to pray. Two months after we were hired as staff, I was granted 3 weekend visits every month. So 3 weekends out of every month, I got an overnight visit with my kids, and I was so excited. And I thought that was where I was trying to get to. I thought that was it. Thank you, Jesus, that you gave me overnight visits with my kids. They called it joint custody. It's not really joint custody. It was as close as we could get, given the distance. My kids were living 3 hours away from where we're at. But thank you, God. This is what all of this has been for. I thought to myself, this has all been worth it just to get here. And I was so content with staying there. I was so content and happy to be a weekend mom. But he wasn't done yet. The same judge, thank you, Lawrence, the same judge that not only took my kids, the same judge that did my divorce, that saw the abuse that I endured, has been the judge for every abuse case for my kids, which is 3. The same judge that looked at me and told me, Theresa, if you mess up one more time, you won't see these kids again. Last May, he gave me sole custody of my girls. But it gets better. It gets better. My husband's been reunited with his son. That was a relationship, you guys, that was ended by the courts a long time ago. I just want to say, just because I got sober, just because we got sober, our life is not easy. It's not easy. We went through a heated custody battle to get my girls. We struggle trying to figure out how to parent. I wasn't a parent. I didn't see my kids for 2 years. I think it was like 4 years that you didn't see Caleb. We had no idea what we were doing. We still don't. Who am I kidding? I'm trying to learn how to be a parent again. I'm dealing with my children who have some deep wounds, you guys. Deep wounds. The different thing about our life today is that, one, we know that we don't have to use, even though life is hard sometimes. Two, we know where to turn when life is hard sometimes. We have support systems. We have church family. We have work family. And we have God in our lives. And we have each other. And we're in a healthy relationship it's not anything that either one of us have ever experienced. I never thought, you guys, that I would ever have more than just those 3 weekend visits with my kids. I never thought it was going to happen. Kyle never thought that he was going to be able to be a father to his son. And we have him throughout the year. He lives in Michigan. It's a long drive. But we get to bring him home with us several times a year. My little girls get to know and experience life with their stepbrother. I never would have thought, and Vanessa, you said this earlier, and it's right here on my notes. I never would have thought that I would have been able to have the life that I have today, but I'm living it. God had such bigger plans for my life than even I had for myself. And I thought my plans were good, but his were so much better. So much better. And I want to leave you guys with this. If you're sitting here today and you're thinking about leaving treatment because it's hard, don't do it. Just sit still. And if you're like me and you're sitting here, when I was in your seats, I thought to myself, everything that I've done, the damage that I've done is irreversible. There's no way that I can clean this mess up that I've made. Don't count yourself out. Don't give up, you guys, because there is not such a thing as too far gone in God's book. It's not a thing. It's not. And the last thing that I want to say is don't count yourself out yet, because God hasn't. And he has a plan for your life, even if you don't. Thank you, guys.